everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's the last day of Dreamforce. It's 8:30 a.m. We're tired, so I really appreciate you coming out to this session. Today I'll be talking about how to improve usability with animation. My name is Anjali Ahuja. I work as a user experience engineer on the user research and analytics team here at Salesforce. Forward-looking statement, you guys, I'm sure have seen this many times by now. I'm going to show you some really awesome things, but please only make purchasing decisions based on what is currently in the product right now. So before I can talk about how to improve usability with animation, I want to get into what is animation. When I first started here at Salesforce and my manager mentioned I would be working on some animation projects, I had this flashback to my childhood where I was like, I'm going to be building monsters and Boo for Monsters, Inc. I love Pixar. I was super excited. And then I was like, that's not exactly what she was talking about. But animation does fit in an enterprise space. So what does animation mean in the enterprise space? Animation can mean the signature style of a product. It means effective transitions between really complex user interfaces. Animation refers to a responsive user interface, so transitioning between tablet and mobile and desktop in a fluid way. Animation is really the feel aspect of the look and feel of your product. So it communicates visually through feeling and emotion, tying a narrative together through a product. And all of these things together make up what we think about as kinetic interfaces. So anything moving in the product is what we refer to as animation in the enterprise space. So as I work through this presentation, I want you to keep these terms in mind and know that I'm really referring to all of these things when I say animation. So why should you care about this? Why should we invest time and money and resources into building animation in the enterprise space when we already have incredible visual design in 2D and static pages? Well, animation and great user experience in general enhances clarity for your user. It drives efficiency for their everyday tasks so they can perform them better and faster. It builds consistency across a product ecosystem and across seemingly unrelated components in a product. And it embodies beauty. It gives your user something thoughtful and elegant to look at. So what makes animation effective? How can we build animation that's grounded in those 4 design principles that drive all of our design decisions here at Salesforce? The first principle of animation is timing. Objects that move on a page should look and feel natural and follow the forces of the real world, like gravity and weight. To achieve this, we use CSS timing properties and easing curves. Let's take a look at an example of this. The first object enters the screen with no animation at all. It just appears. The second object enters in on a linear curve. It's a little bit better than the first one, but it still feels unnatural and mechanical. The third object enters in on a cubic Bezier curve. This one is almost like how a car would slow to a stop when it reaches a red light. It's being grounded into its final destination, anchoring it on the page, and letting the user know that's where it belongs. This is the most natural sense that we get using the CSS timing curve. The second principle of animation is choreography. Choreography means that animation should build narrative through a product and feel logically related to each other. Choreography consists of 4 main concepts. The sequence of motion, so in what order are things appearing or disappearing on the page, and what message does that convey to the user? Secondary action, so in what way does the user interact with an interface, and how does that interface respond to the user? Third, CSS timing tokens. So this is similar to what we saw on the timing slide, but the use of consistent CSS timing tokens creates recognizable and repeated patterns that convey similar messages to the user. And fourth, the movement through 3-dimensional space. Now this is what really differentiates a motion and kinetic interface from a static interface. The use of the z-axis in an animated interface creates a visual hierarchy for the user. With this visual hierarchy, we can elevate more important information to the user and push back less important or less relevant information. So let's take a look at an example of this. I really love this website because I think it shows really effective choreography and combines those 4 components I just mentioned. On scroll, we can see this beautiful exploration of the product using 3-dimensional space. So the user doesn't have to click through any static screens or static images, and they get to explore this product in a whole new way. The use of consistent timing to go through this modal creates a repeated and recognizable pattern that the user is successfully walking through the site. The order of motion on scrolling of the screen first shows you the most important information, like that 3D expansion of the product, and then shows you important information but less relevant, so the additional information you might need to learn about the product. So all of these things together create really effective choreography in the site. So now that we know how to make effective animations, why should we do this? Why is it still important? But animation can solve many design challenges for the user that static interfaces struggle to solve. Let's take a look. Animation tells me where I am in the interface. It provides context and orientation, especially in an interface that's totally new for a user. In this case, a user is logging into Salesforce. They click on the input fields, and they click on the Submit button, and it's guiding them through the form. On Submit, that Salesforce logo gets grounded into the global navigation at the top. And then the rest of the global navigation fades in before the data enters into the page. This slight delay gives the user time to create a mental model of the page, getting grounded into that global navigation and how they can navigate through the app. Let's still dig a little bit further into app navigation. So once the user is on this home page, there's a lot of cool data that they can see, but especially in an application like Salesforce, where a user is navigating between different tabs, the way we show data differs a lot from page to page. So to create an effective and fluid transition, we use these consistent timing tokens to first remove data from the old page, load the new navigation system for the new page, and then load in the data. Again, this is giving time for the user to create a mental model on how to use the new tools and instrumentation on the new page before that data loads in. Here's an example we see every day of natural feedback that gives you context and orientation. This is just a simple list on my phone. Scrolling to the top of the list, we see this really subtle bounce. That conveys the message to the user that they're at the top or bottom of the list rather than the user waiting for more data to load as if they were in a web page. Here's an example of full transition choreography that provides context and orientation. From that home page, the tile radially expands and physically moves to the left, creating a mental model for the user that when they click that back arrow, they're going to translate back to the left to the home page and access all those tiles again. Another design challenge that animation can solve is, what can I do here? Let's take a look at this page. This is a pretty complicated page. There's a lot going on. There's an email template. There's controls at the top. And the user is exploring what they can do in this page. This is a great example of visual hierarchy. A modal appears, dimming out the rest of the background. This is a really simple transition of opacity and a translate of that modal. But we're raising that modal in the visual hierarchy, raising relevant information to the user without removing them from the context of where they are in the page. They can easily dismiss that modal and go right back into what they were doing with that new and relevant information to help them. In this case, this is another really subtle animation of the notification bell ringing. On a page where there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of components and cards and controls and the global navigation, that slight animation lets the user know there's new and relevant information waiting for them, and they can click it whenever they want. And that animation is a repeated and recognizable pattern that they then tie to clicking on that and informing action for the user. In this case, animation is focusing the attention of the user. The user wants to navigate through Trailhead and learn some Service Cloud basics, but the Service Cloud trail has 9 modules and hundreds of units to get started. In this case, a really simple animation of bringing that tray down guides the attention of the user to where they should start in that trail. Is something happening? This is a design challenge that I personally love as a use case for animation because I think static screens really struggle with this. Let's take a look. Every morning when I turn on my phone, I see the screen on the left. I feel anxious and impatient because I want my phone to turn on, I want my data to load, I want to see what's going on, and I'm not sure if it's working. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter, but eventually it does turn on. We recently acquired a Google Pixel to do some testing on, and the first time I turned on the Pixel, I was greeted with this really beautiful and joyful animation. Google not only is letting me know that the phone is working, that things are happening, and they're loading my data and they're turning it on, but they took a moment that's generally associated with anxiety or impatience and turned it into a moment of delight for the user. They also use this to strengthen their brand in a position where normally we wouldn't be doing anything on the screen. There's nothing really relevant to show to the user. So this is a great use case for animation. A way we use this at Salesforce all the time is through our seasonal release logos. If any of you have ever logged into Salesforce, you've probably seen one of these, whether it's Astra or sassy seagulls or penguins, and we love our release logos here. They not only convey to you what release you're on, but it gives Salesforce time to load that data in the background. Imagine if you logged into Salesforce and all you saw was a blank static white screen for 3 to 4 seconds while we load all of that data and that information that you need. You would feel impatient and anxious and wonder if something is even working. In this case, the animation aids in perceived load time. It feels slightly faster, and we're conveying important information to you. In this case, animation aids in a transition state. Oftentimes, we're interacting with an application, and there's nothing left for the user to do but wait for the application to do that work in the background. In the case on the left, we're seeing a user try to make a phone call through Google Hangouts. That slight radial animation with vibration lets the user know that someone else is being contacted. That same radial animation we can see used on the right in an Uber app. When you call an Uber, you want your car to be matched, you're waiting for that to happen, and that slight radial animation lets you know something is working, something is happening, and there's nothing left for you to do. Another design challenge that animation can solve is, did that work? A confirmation of user task. So let's take a look at this example. Here a user is sending an email, and on submit, the entire email template morphs into an envelope and gets sent off into the cloud. A few really subtle things are happening here. We're not only confirming that the user was able to successfully send their email, but we're bringing in our own brand by sending that email off into the cloud, differentiating it from traditional email clients like Gmail or Yahoo. This is a case we see really commonly with user input validation using animation. In this case, animation takes advantage of the real estate that's already on the screen to let the user know that what they're doing is incorrect or correct, rather than having them fill out the whole form, click on submit, and then have to go back and fill it out again if their input was invalid. In this case, animation is used to bring a moment of delight in addition to confirming a user task. Especially in an enterprise space, it's hard to bring in moments of delight, and they're rare and can often be distracting. In this case, we're confirming that the user is able to favorite the page, and we provide this moment of delight that's repeatable and recognizable for the user. So animation not only solves these design challenges for the user, but they strengthen the brand of your product. So let's take a look at an example of this. On the left, we see a static logo for the Salesforce experience. It's a great logo. I think it shows offers geometric cloud, shows that we're an engineering-powered organization. But on the right, we see a dynamic version of this logo. It starts with LED electron, symbolizing intelligence in our product, and then grows out and forms to this geometric cloud, symbolizing the fact that we are this vast ecosystem of products, and we come together to build the Salesforce experience. So there's a lot happening and a lot of messages being communicated in this really simple dynamic logo. It doesn't take that much time to build out. Another example of how we can strengthen brand is through bringing in your brand narrative into your product. In this case, animation is used in places where we're not generally showing data to the user. It's real estate that's unused in the product, but we can bring in our brand of Trailhead to empower users to understand they can always be learning our product. We're not being intrusive, but we're providing a moment of delight and tying a narrative through this product. This is an example that I really love of Google Material Design's motion. Their design system brings in really consistent timing tokens and signature types of motion that when you look at a Google product, you understand, okay, this is Google. The use of really consistent shapes, timing, and choreography creates a signature style across a vast product ecosystem really effectively. But wait, what about performance? I'm sure you guys are in the audience, you're developers, I'm an engineer, and we always hear pushback in our organization that animation takes a hit on performance for the user. But this is not always the case. There are 4 super easy CSS transitions on the browser. This includes position, scale, rotation, and opacity. The majority of animations that you saw in the slide deck today use these 4 transitions, and this will still always result in a higher than 60 frames per second rate of rendering. So try to stick to these 4 transitions when building animation into your product. If you do choose to try to animate other CSS properties, use the will change property to prepare your browser, especially for repaint and layout animations. This lets your browser know what you're about to change, so it's not constantly checking for that repaint, resulting in more fluid and smooth animations. Another way to make transitions more performant is to use the request animation frame method in JavaScript. This will determine the appropriate frame rate for your animation depending on what browser you're using and what device you're on. Here at Salesforce, we want everyone to be able to equally use our product with no issues at all. And that's why we strongly believe in building accessible animations. To do this, try to avoid flashing and looping in your animation, as this could cause negative health effects for your user. Always provide text equivalents for informational animations. So if a user, for any reason, decides to turn off animations, they're still able to receive all of the information they would if they didn't have them. And as always, shorter is better. Try to stick to 2 to 3 second long transitions max, as this would not create a perceived lag in load time. Instead, it would aid load time. So the key takeaways for today are that animation helps the user. It solves a variety of design challenges that static interfaces do not. Animation can steer focus, it guides attention, gives meaningful feedback to the user, and provides context and orientation, allowing the user to create a mental model of an interface. All of this together improves the overall user experience of a product. Grounding it back into those 4 design principles, animation can improve clarity, drive efficiency for your user, enhance consistency across a product ecosystem, and strengthen brand narrative through your product. We are thinking about animation here at Salesforce. We are building it to be performant, accessible, and effective, and you should too. Here are some resources to help you on your journey to bring animation into your product. The first is the Lightning Design System animation guidelines. Visit lightningdesignsystem.com to explore our gallery, our timing effects and dimension guidelines, and see what you can do to bring animation into your product. After this, also feel free to head over to Camp Design and see some of our animation stations and talk to people about what we're doing at Salesforce. In addition, here are a few developer resources that I have found really helpful on my journey to animation. First is the GreenSock Animation Library. It's a JavaScript library that helps you optimize animations across browsers and different devices, and is super performant and helpful. A couple of animation performant guidelines, and then the material motion design guidelines that I think show really effective ways of using timing and choreography. There are also some CSS tutorials on transitions and how to build that into your product. And last but not least, I know it's your last day in San Francisco, so make sure you check out the best burrito in San Francisco, El Farolito at 24th and Mission. If you didn't learn anything at all from this presentation, this is what I'll leave you with. Thank you.